One, a two, a 1, 2, 3.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of SpeakEasy. It's great to have a rhythm section with us tonight. And on drums we have Bob Nadler, who's a teacher at Live Music Center, and he's also a high school teacher. And Jesse Hicks on drums.
Bass.
Bass.
Drums too, guitar. He's got too many strings on that thing.
It looks like a sitar from here.
I play drums on this string.
And for more support, joining us is Sam Ocastro. Locastro. Boy, am I mixing things up tonight. Thank you, Sammy, for joining us. And of course, John Fine, my co-host. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Let's start with Bob. Bob, what high school do you teach at?
I went to Vallejo High School.
Vallejo High School.
Vallejo High School, yeah.
And you teach where?
I teach at, right now I teach at Live Music Center, of course. I have, I think, 23 students there. Wow, I also teach at Benicia High School.
Benicia High School.
17 years now, I think.
Gosh.
Yeah, and at Vacaville Christian Center, also in Vacaville here.
In all those 17 years, have you learned anything about teaching?
No, nothing, no.
No, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about your teaching experience and how fun it is with students. Jesse has quite a few, has a workload. You've got a waiting list, and you're one of the most popular teachers there at Live Music, Jesse.
Full time, 5 days a week.
And it's so great, your attitude, you're always raring to go. It's great to see you there.
Yeah. When I was a kid, I was like, I'm telling you guys, I'm going to be a professional musician. Everyone was like, yeah, right.
And here you are. That is so great. What are some of the experiences you've gained from teaching students?
Oh, man. Experiences I've gained. Well, the more you explain something yourself, the sharper you get at it.
Exactly.
So I'm constantly teaching myself things over and over again while I'm teaching my students. And
isn't it so rewarding to working with kids and you see?
Oh man, absolutely.
From like the time when they came in and they didn't know what an E string was, and they're leaving and they're playing these marvelous pieces and stuff. That's a joy.
Yeah. Musical instruments aren't exactly ergonomic. You pick one up and it's hard to get it to do anything. And then I'll see people and they'll struggle for months, and then something will just snap in them. And all of a sudden they'll just be totally fluid on it. It's amazing to just watch the transition, just people turning into musicians. It's pretty great.
Jesse has so much knowledge. He's like a walking encyclopedia of this brain. And anytime I ever have a question concerning anything about theory, this is the guy I go to. And always sets me straight. So I want to thank you so much, Jesse, for that.
Thanks.
It's awesome. John, with your students too, like teaching them to read, teaching them to play, to perform, all that whole thing. I hear a lot out of your room. I hear a lot of performance.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably because that's my background.
Yeah.
My teacher didn't teach me to read. So I try to get all my students to at least have the basics of it. If I had learned the basics of it, I'd be a much better reader today, and I wouldn't have to turn down lucrative gigs sometimes. If your rock and roll band doesn't make it, you you might be in a good position if somebody calls you and says, "Hey, we need somebody to play in the pit orchestra for this production of West Side Story,"
Yeah.
which is an incredibly complicated score. There's no way you can cut it by ear, and there's no way you can cut it from memory. You've got to be able to read it. I'd have to turn the gig down. You know, it doesn't matter how much it pays, and it doesn't matter how bad they need me. I don't read well enough to do it. And I want all my students to be better readers than me, and luckily that's not going to take a whole bunch. So, but I stress the playing too, because the other side of it is the world is full of classically trained musicians who are not taught to hear.
Right.
Which I think is just criminal, because you really need both. I was in a band years and years ago with a young lady who had classical flute training for, God, hard to talk here. Classical flute training for years. She had played in a college student orchestra under Leonard Bernstein. Incredible flute player, but she couldn't play note one. She couldn't improvise "Mary Had a Little Lamb" unless you wrote it out for her. But anything that could be written, she could play. But that's not really being a musician. That's kind of being a parrot.
I'd rather have the ears than the eyes.
Yeah.
You know?
Very important. And we're going to demonstrate that because as you can see, we don't have any music in front of us. And we're going to play a song that we do at jam sessions called Equinox. And Jesse hosts these jam sessions, and they're open to our students that take from us and they want to have that experience of playing with a rhythm section. This is what it's like. Jesse, before we start that song, can you tell them just a little bit about those jam sessions and invite the public to come?
Let me shamelessly plug it. It's
plug away.
First and third Sundays, whatever the first and third Sunday of the month is, 6 to 8 p.m. at Live Music. What's the phone number of Live Music?
448-1511.
There it is. Yeah. You can call them and ask if it's going on. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to demonstrate what it's like just to play by ear and play off of each other. And this song is called Equinox.
Yeah.
Yeah. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. C minor. There we go.
know, it's so great to have that chemistry among musicians. Like, we all just, like you said, played off of one another. And we've only been together about 5 minutes. Sometimes it takes years for musicians to develop that kind of camaraderie. And this is the kind of things that you learn by coming to the jam sessions. John, I know, stresses this quite a bit. You want to give everyone their space. Like when Jesse, when you played, everybody toned down, everybody stopped, gave you your moment. And then with the drums, the same thing. But John, no one gives us our moment. Everybody please playing when we're playing, right?
Well,
what's up with that?
I don't want
they haven't come up the same way we did. They'll learn. I think, if we explain it to them, and we don't want to do it before the jam session starts, because that'll intimidate people.
Right.
Give them a chance to play, and then, okay, there's certain standard ways of doing things, and basically everybody listens to everybody else. If you can't hear the soloist, it means you're playing too loud.
Right.
And if nobody jumps in within 3 or 4 measures, somebody needs to jump in and take a solo. And I'm really sick and tired of it being me.
I like.
And you got to be. I'm sorry, but you got to be very sensitive of the other musically. You have to be very, very sensitive to all the people around you. So, and I always listen. Always using your ear at all times.
And too, like Frank Sinatra once said about the bossa novas. He said, "Don't hurt the music." And that was kind of a neat thing.
The music has feelings too.
That's right. Here he is, a singer, and he's telling the musicians, "Don't hurt this music." Yeah. And that's kind of cool. We were going to do a tune, Chameleon, was it?
All right.
Yeah, let's do that to show the audience the difference in styles. What we just played was, what would you consider? The one we just played was what?
Straight ahead jazz.
Straight ahead jazz, swing tune. Yeah. And this one is more of a funk feel.
Yeah.
So right. Chameleon.
All right.
Oh, it's already got that groove. You know, I'd like to talk a little bit about the playing styles. Like John is a phenomenal lead guitar player.
Yeah.
Coming up, like you'd listen to Eric Clapton.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And some of the other guys, and you'd cop licks off of
Oh,
them,
absolutely. Clapton was, when I was started, well, my earliest influences were guys like Dick Dale and the Ventures, in which we just did the show on surf music. So I don't think I need to go over any of that. We just did. And of course, Chuck Berry, whom Sam over here digs Chuck Berry, and I've had him playing some Chuck Berry stuff too. So that stuff, you know. That was an influence on me. But when I started developing enough facility to get a guitar style, and it took me about 4 or 5 years to get to that point because I didn't have anybody around that could show me what I needed to learn. I had a folk guitar teacher. She didn't know anything about rock and roll or blues or any of that stuff. And so I was kind of on my own. I spent a lot of time with my ear up to the record player trying to figure out how guys were doing things like bending strings, which is pretty basic. I mean, I think most beginning guitar students at least know what it takes to bend a string, even if they can't quite do it yet. I didn't know. Nobody told me. So when I actually started getting enough facility on the guitar to get a style, a guy named Mike Bloomfield had come out of Chicago, and he was the guy that everybody was trying to copy. Kind of a hyper blues player, a lot of stuff like, let me get a little more, let's see. Very hyper, a lot of notes, and I didn't really want to play that way. I figured there was something better somewhere, and then I started hearing about this guy from England who was by the name of Eric, who was better than Bloomfield. And he came along, and I first heard him, and it was like, oh, okay, that's the guy I want to sound like. Because he was. A lot of bent notes, not a lot of endlessly circling repetition, which a lot of the guys were getting into back then. And I said, well, I don't think I want to do that. I want to sound like that Eric guy. So he was a big influence on me. And then Jimi Hendrix came along, and it was like,
jeez,
this guy's better than anybody. And he was at the time. Was like, what planet is this guy from?
What year was that?
67.
67.
I graduated high school in 68, and me and all my guitar playing buddies would listen to Hendrix and go, that's not possible. How is he doing that?
And now guys like Eddie Van Halen and
we couldn't
even imagine that then.
Yeah.
There you go.
But if it hadn't been for Hendrix, I don't think Van Halen would have played the way he did.
And I think that's why our styles complement one another, because while you're listening to Eric Clapton and I was listening to like Jim Messina, I was listening to the rhythm guitarists because I was primarily a vocalist. So lead guitar wasn't my forte, it was rhythm. And I was a big Jim Sullivan, for instance, with Tom Jones was one of my favorite guys. I used to just like to listen to him play rhythm. He had that real... So that's the kind of stuff I was listening to, rhythm guitar players and trying to get more. And like with Sergio Mendes, when he came out, I mean, I was blown away with those chord changes. So even though our influencers are different, it's amazing how we can combine them. And
Well,
just
back in
get
our
strength.
day, I mean, we're about the
Yeah,
same. We're
exactly.
all, except for Jesse here, who's the young punk of the bunch. We're all, and Sam, of course. We're all about the same age, and we all came up listening to the same stuff.
Yeah.
Back then, everything that we've mentioned, you could hear on one radio station.
Yeah, that's true.
You might not hear as much of what you absolutely loved as you wanted to hear, but you could hear it all on the top 40 radio station. They'd even play some country. First time I heard Buck Owens was doing Act Naturally after the Beatles had already had a hit with it. They played Buck Owens' earlier version on pop radio. It was one of the very few hardcore country tunes that they'd play. But we heard that. We heard like tons of R&B and Motown and the Stax Volt stuff, and just a huge varieties of stuff. And you don't get that on one radio station anymore. That's right. You've got to get satellite radio and channel switch all the time to get that kind of variety anymore. It's just everything's gotten demographic to death.
You know, you've given me an idea for a future show, John. Maybe we ought to do a Beatles show.
Oh,
where we could do some of those tunes that are, because they have different styles.
Oh,
the Beatles went through
yeah.
different changes. Listen to that on a bass guitar. Let's do it, Jesse. That sounds great. Really cool. Yeah, so we'll do a Beatle night. That'll be really cool. And hopefully you guys can join us for that. That would be really phenomenal.
Great, yeah.
That would be great. But there was another tune I wanted to do with you when we were talking about Chameleon and some of the other things. It was I can't remember now. Was it a blues tune we were going to do, or was it that? It was a little bit of that Jimi Hendrix thing we were going to do.
Oh yeah, we were okay. Foxy Lady, I
Foxy
think
Lady,
we were.
just a little bit of it.
All right.
Just to give the audience a sampling of the different styles and stuff that you played was amazing to me.
Don't have enough level to get the feedback. Sorry.
You hear these different styles and you hear the different things that guitar players would add into it, but you hear that definitive Jimi Hendrix and you know right away that's Jimi Hendrix. That's it. Can we
Miles Davis.
Miles Davis.
Coltrane.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can listen to those guys and just know it's them. Just one note on a trumpet,
That's
you know
amazing.
it's Miles.
That's right. Yeah, Harry James is another one like that. One note on the trumpet.
And guitar players back in our day were like that. I'm fortunate, like I've said on some of these shows before, I grew up in San Francisco with just great guitar players all over town. And everybody talks about the San Francisco sound, but there were a million different San Francisco sounds. And you could hear Carlos Santana.
Right.
You could hear Jorma Kaukonen from the Jefferson Airplane. You could hear Jerry Garcia in the Grateful Dead. John Cipollina from Quicksilver Messenger Service, and within two notes you knew who it was.
Who it was.
Everybody was distinctive. Eric Clapton, same way. George Harrison. I mean, Nowadays, you listen to rock guitar players, and they all sound the same. They've
Well-
all been listening to one another.
We're almost out of time, John. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. We're going to go out with a little B.B. King kind of thing, John. Maybe like The Thrill Is Gone or something.
Okay,
We'll take it out with that.
C minor.
C minor
All
sounds
right,
really good.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Mm-hmm.